Well, here I am, folks. Maybe coming back to tell a little bit of a tale here. One about my old man and about movies and society in general, and how this may tie in to the society in which we live in general. Now, I think my father went to see movies to escape his childhood, which was kind of rough, or at least his home life was kind of rough. And often he would, after school, he would escape to the movies. And the two things that he enjoyed, that he talked about, that brought him joy, was when he talked about the movies, and he talked about working summers on his uncle's ranch in Wilcox, Arizona. And I believe he worked there from age 13 to, I believe, 17 years of age until he graduated high school, went to Chico State for, I believe, 2 years, and then worked a few odd jobs until he entered the Air Force because he did not want to be drafted into the Army. And my father while he was in the Air Force, actually, I believe when he was overseas in Germany, he showed movies. He ran the projector. And of course, on some nights, he would make a little bit of extra cash showing more adult fare to the GIs on the Air Force base. When he was honorably discharged from the Air Force, he was still in Germany selling cars. I believe selling cars to GIs. I think selling American cars to GIs. And he met my mother, who was selling cosmetics to GI. She was another, I guess, what you would call an expat. And then I was born. And for many different reasons, my father left Germany for the United States. and always had dreams of making it in the film industry, and always had a love of cinema. And in particular, I think he had a love for Western cinema, but he also had a love for gangster films and film noir, and even for some of the more recent, or the recent films at the time being the films of the late 1960s and 70s. Um, I certainly became more knowledgeable about his filmmaking style by the late 1970s and 80s, and his love for films. But when my father came back to the United States, he looked to going into film school with the GI Bill, and he picked a film school called Lawrence Merrick. Lawrence Merrick was an Israeli Jew, and he he basically got my father's taught my father quite a bit about film production, film writing, and many of the things that that he had loved as a child. He saw how the process was done. And the first film that my father worked on was a documentary called Manson. Manson was kind of a mistake because they were filming the reason Manson even got made was they were filming a movie in Chatsworth called The Black Angels. And the camera crew and the film crew had some downtime, and where they were filming was kind of close to Spawn Ranch. And they filmed the commune there. And actually, I don't know who the cameraman was, but I know that from my understanding, Lawrence Merrick, the producer who owned the film school, was rather pissed off that he wasted film. Shortly after the Manson murders and then the Manson trial, when they caught the Manson family, was underway, and Lawrence Merrick was asking that cameraman if he had the film. And the film, I believe, didn't get released until 1973. And during that time, Lawrence Merrick was coming up with some crazy ideas. He actually wanted to get the Manson, like he was thinking of even, and this is just what my father was saying, and this could be absolutely untrue, but one of the things he said was, I'd like to give them some guns so they could try to, get the Manson family to escape and try to pull a coup or something like that. I just remember that being said. But it just reminds me of the movie or the documentary Roger and Me with Michael Moore. the documentary shows Michael Moore going around trying to get an interview and being refused an interview with Roger, I believe Roger Smith, and in reality, they did have an interview, and the whole film was based upon a myth. I was going to take a quick swig of water while I continue my stories. And for whatever reason, my father had a falling out with Lawrence Merrick. And one of the stories that I heard that my old man did was there was a little pebble garden that Lawrence Merrick had, and my father picked up those pebbles and put them in the VCR, and I think he also damaged parts of the camera. I think he was kind of pissed off. Now, that may not be true, but my father was known to destroy items and stuff like that. He would sometimes destroy equipment in the house because he was pissed off at it. He would slam phones down and sometimes be known to break things. He did that less and less. But my father did, basically, he wrote for Dramalog, and he interviewed a gentleman by the name of Robert Saki. Robert Saki was a man who looked quite a bit like Humphrey Bogart. And he was in the film The Man with Bogart's Face. And it's an okay film, but it's kind of an homage to film noir. But getting back to my father, and my father and this man had film writing projects that never really took off. But I do remember that my father would often take my brother and I to both the Bing, the New Art, and the Beverly Cinema to look at what they call classic movies. And my father would always say the films today are not the films of yesteryear. And my father didn't say that as a prude, because he liked some of the modern films out there as well. He took me to see the movie The Wild Bunch and Cross of Iron as a child as well. So he was no prude when it came to films, and he was a big fan of director John Ford, which Pia Zadora mentioned Stagecoach, which was John Wayne's first major film. And I remember him talking about films today versus films of then. And I was a kid of the 80s. And I guess I would agree with him just to agree with him. But for me, I was still more entertained by the films of my generation, which were the 80s and the 70s. And I still am a big fan of the movies of the 70s. I would always joke with my dad, because we were also around when the video cassette players were popular, and my dad would often pick an older classic movie, and we actually had to drive out further away to get the classic films. There was a video store called Videotheque, which was in Westwood, which was further away because my dad wanted to watch, uh, one of the classics, and you know, Bad Day at Black Rock, um, and other films. And at that time, it was kind of sad because we stopped going to the revival movie houses, um, and we would basically rent the classic films. And sometimes, like before, you're not allowed to talk during the movies in the theater, but I would talk to him, and sometimes I would say, call Orville Redenbacher. This film's a real cornball. And I would kind of joke that these films, these what my father called were classic films, and they don't make them like they used to, were kind of corny. And I often will watch film reactions, and people will watch the original Star Wars, and they will say, "Yeah, I don't get it," and it's because I always think that the original Star Wars are the best, and there are people that are not as impressed, but I have to realize that movies and music are on an emotional level, and most films are not realistic. Uh, I think there was a time when films started to become more realistic, and that was primarily in the late 60s and 1970s. And then films went back to being um, rather uh, kind of more predictable, and because they wanted to make a profit when the blockbusters came out. Uh, People wanted to see happy endings. Uh, People wanted to, see the villain get it in the end. So uh, much of the cinema went back to um, happier, more fruitful endings, with the exception of some of the hood movies. And I don't find those films, many of them, to be very real. A lot of them are kind of, if you look at them in retrospect, they tend to be kind of corny and just a bit on the ultra negative side. And I looked at the serious films of the past, and they always had a level of hope. These films don't have any hope or anything like that, and they don't have really any answers. They're more of a lecture to us. I remember watching Boys in the Hood, and I was impressed with that film when I first saw it. But when I look at it again, I have more critical eyes. Um, the film that I had extreme critical eyes when I saw was a film called Higher Learning, which was, I think, one of the first mainstream woke movies. And I still think probably the most woke film of all time is probably the movie Higher Learning. And Donning Armor says, "I don't think I agree, Brian, but you are lucky to have a father that you had a relationship." Yeah, I mean, again, and let's see here. And then there's other people arguing about Antifa and denying people's affiliation. That is just kind of silly, kind of stupid. But what can one do? And I just wanted to say that films are not real, and films were and are at times corny and are hyperbolic. And it basically, I think, the films you see as a child, you see in child's eyes, and a lot of times those movies bring you back to your childhood. I have fond memories of the movies as a child. I have fond memories of the movie theaters that are no longer around. There was a movie theater called the Palms Movie Theater, which had great popcorn. They also had the Moralta and the Culver Theater. The Culver Theater used to be notorious for its dollar night, and people said that it was kind of dangerous, which was overblown. And the Moralta was actually 50 cents. And right next to the Palms Theater, they had a nice little restaurant called, God, now I can't even remember the name of the restaurant they had. I think it was Roma's, and they had great pizza and great spaghetti and meatballs. But yeah, so I think that'll do it for the show. I think I'll come more in on cinema and media and how it's changed, and how it's changed a lot of the outlooks within life. And mainstream media tends to gaslight a lot and put things out there that aren't necessarily true. But man, can it be enjoyable and joyous when you sit down with that tub of popcorn and a Coca-Cola or a soft drink, and the lights go down and the screen comes up, lights up, and sometimes you'll see a commercial for the Times. Well, at least I saw the commercial for the Los Angeles Times, and then coming attractions came. Sometimes a cartoon, and then the start of the movie. Lots of fun. Anyway, yes, well, Donning Armour says he grew up with Stallone, Arnold, Van Damme, and the like. He was an 80s kid, so yeah, I remember those guys as well. And there could be a lot of entertainment with those guys. And like I said, as Donnie grew up with Arnold and Stallone, my father grew up with John Wayne, Randolph Scott, Humphrey Bogart, Alan Ladd, Gene Kelly. Shane. Anyway, I could go on and on. But films are not reality. Oftentimes, media is not reality. So I bid you all adieu. I hope the show was entertaining. And, well, you know what? I want to... Dick Powell. Now, funny, okay, this gentleman mentions Dick Powell. My father, and I'll say this before I go, my father actually met Dick Powell and was asked to contact him after he graduated high school, and it just fell through. But that's another interesting thing. Anyway, like, subscribe, leave a comment down below, maybe even share this video, and visit our website at transparencyandmedia.com. merritt.com. Also visit our Rumble page. I'm going to start putting our Rumble page on our main page because I might start deleting some of the shows. Thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of the night.